It's a stormy night. Heavy rain is hitting the window like gravel. Thunder rolling hard enough to shake the bed frame. You're alone in a hotel room on the top floor, so you feel closer to the storm. Lightning keeps turning the pitch black room white and then black again, like a strobe as it strikes. You press your forehead to the cold glass of the window and count the seconds between flash and boom. Then the flash lights up the garden down below, and you see it just for a split second before it goes dark again. A woman in a white dress is standing in the lawn, and just when your eyes start to adjust to the darkness, another flash. Squinting hard this time, you look, and she's closer. You can make out her laced hand holding a parasol, but the rain goes right through it. Then it's dark again. Thunder booms and your heart nearly jumps out of your chest. On the next flash, she's even closer, but she's not walking because there's no feet touching the ground. The dress floats. You don't breathe, thinking that it'll help you see better. And then it fades to black again, and she's gone. Hi everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. You might know me from my true crime channel, Kimbyrleigha. I am Kimbyrleigha or Kimbyr, and this is Candidly Kimbyr. And on this channel, we will be diving into some of the most interesting real life stories from around the web, mostly focusing on one of my favorite places, which is Reddit. Now I'm a little sad because this will be our last episode of our Halloween horror stories until next year. But of course, there will be more creepy stories to come next week. So let's jump into the first one entitled Halloween Fright. It's from the Let's Not Meet subreddit, and it was posted by tinyhuman89. Now I'm starting with this one for a reason. I saw something in the news this week that completely freaked me out. And this story was similar. So I'll tell you the story first. Here goes. The poster wrote, "Last night had to be the most frightening minutes of my life. It was 10:30 p.m. The baby is down for bedtime. I'm in the bedroom trying to fall asleep. Next thing I know, the doorbell rings. It's 10:30 at night. Who the hell is ringing my doorbell? It's going to wake up the baby, and I'm near angry and a little shaken. I peek through the peephole and see two men that look like they're in their early to mid-20s, and at this point, I just get scared. What are two strangers doing ringing and knocking at 10:30 at night, especially on Halloween night?" I want to pause. OP, with all due respect, it's Halloween night. It's 10:30. It isn't that late, so I find it a little odd that she added, especially on Halloween. It would actually be weirder if it wasn't Halloween, but I get it. I heard that this year, since Halloween's on a Friday, people are going to be coming out there and they're not going to leave until past 11 p.m., but let's hear the rest. She said, "I froze for a minute and I just watched. They kept ringing and knocking and I retreated to the bedroom to grab my phone. I called my fiance because I'm not smart and should have called the police first, but he doesn't answer because he's asleep and 6 hours away for an FTX. Now cutting in, I don't know what FTX is. Is it abbreviation for field training exercise? I'm not sure because that would be an E, but I see why OP would be freaked out. The nonstop knocking and ringing, that would get to me too, and I do have a little one." She went on to write, "They just kept ringing and knocking for almost 5 minutes. They weren't giving up. Some sense kicks in, and I called the police non-emergency line. I didn't call 911 because I wasn't sure if it qualified as an emergency. I didn't know what they wanted. Right as the dispatcher takes my name and address, they leave. I tell the dispatcher to cancel the report, and he tells me that if they come back, just call 911. I have never been so scared in my life. I'm home alone with the baby while my fiance is away. I never felt so threatened in my own home. My fiance is hoping that they were either trying to prank someone or they were drunk, trying to get in the wrong apartment. My instinct tells me they weren't friendly, and my instinct is usually right. I was nearly defenseless in my home. I'm not about to open the door to two strange people. I'm still shaking today. I don't want to leave the apartment. I really don't want them to come back again. I'd rather not have to threaten that I have a weapon now that I know where it is. And I will use it if absolutely necessary as the last line of defense. I'd rather not encounter them again. I hope they stay away. Okay, so OP, this is 100% valid. It's scary. And it does qualify as an emergency, and you can and should call 911 right away. I do understand her wanting to call her fiance first, but I always opt to call the authorities because time is of the essence. And it was Halloween. So especially on Halloween, I would assume they're just being jerks, but you never know. And you're home with a little baby. So your instincts want to protect this little human, which makes it even scarier. But let's go to the comments. Escatade said, I know this sounds funny, but get dog toys and rough them up and sit them outside, or get a big heavy leash and look up big dog barking sounds, because robbers or people with malicious intent will stay clear of people with dogs, as it means it's more difficult to get in and more difficult to get away unnoticed. Make it seem like you have a dog, and hopefully they'll take a hint. I'll say they could, but they could also have weapons. And unfortunately, a dog isn't going to stop them if they really do want to cause harm. But I agree. Having an actual dog does usually deter people. Mine bark really loud, and it does make people leave. Plus, one of mine named Dexter, name is appropriate, he will attack. But in the next comments, Raylin21 said, I'm sorry, I LOL'd at the I'm not smart enough and should have called the police first part, because that's something that I would have done, is called my fiance. But on a serious note, you did the right thing. OP responded, that's okay. I laugh at my own stupidity most of the time. My fiance didn't answer his phone when I called him first, as he was asleep. He was so worried the next day, but he can't leave where he is. I now have no qualms about calling 911 first. And to be fair, I was thinking, we don't know how old OP is. Not all of us have life experience. We've never called 911. This could have been her first time, so I don't really blame her. And now maybe this experience, as she said, will train her to know what to do for the next time. Hopefully there's not one, but you just never know. Kate Hater said, my husband is a police officer. Always call 911. Don't worry if you think it's ridiculous. Better safe than sorry or dead. Also, a gun. Train with it. Get comfortable with it in your hands. My husband takes to the gun range to practice and train. Agreed. And arming yourself is even better. But here's why I mentioned this story. Oh my God. Did any of you happen to see this out in Virginia? 3 people wearing scary costumes came to a woman's house. One was the horror movie villain Michael Myers, the other was a clown, and the third was a really creepy nun. And they actually started ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door, all the while they're being recorded on the Ring doorbell camera. And it is just so freaky, and I'm about to play it, but it happened around 10 p.m. on October 14th, so just a couple weeks ago. There was a young woman at home alone, and her name is Shayla, and her dog was barking like crazy. She comes to the door, she asks who's there, and these disguised people start telling her, it's your worst nightmare, in these really creepy, weird voices. And then they're laughing and giggling. It's so strange. Your worst nightmare. Now, initially, she thought that they were just pranksters doing some kind of Halloween stunt. So when she first saw them just standing there in her front walkway, she actually said Happy Halloween. But then she quickly realized that this was something a lot more sinister. The clown comes up, opens the screen door, starts knocking on the door, then walks back to his friends, and they stand there together and just laugh. Then the Mike Myers one comes up and he bangs on the door. Then he walks back and just waits, laughing and laughing. But then they say, we can see you. Come out. It's your worst nightmare. And then just these evil, weird giggles again and again. It's scary. It's terrifying. And imagine you're seeing this at your front door. I see you. Your worst nightmare. Look at this clown. Oh my God, I would personally be so terrified. And the fact that they say it's either you come out or we're coming in is absolutely terrifying. And they weren't leaving. It's either you come out or we coming in. Then the nun comes up, knocking really hard on the door and keeps saying it's your worst nightmare. They kept taking turns until Mike Myers starts turning the actual doorknob again and again, just rattling it, saying,
"Open up the door! Open the door! Open the door!"
This was loud yelling. It was terrifying. And I'm sorry, there was one kind of funny part, even though we shouldn't be laughing at this. The mumbling through the rubber mask does kind of make it a little funny, but this is no joke.
Act like he's serious. Act like he's serious.
They were making really threatening gestures, and they were doing that right into the camera. They knew they were being recorded. They knew these homeowners could see them, and they weren't even afraid of the consequences. But you know what you didn't see? They apparently go into the backyard after this, and they're still trying to get inside, and that is scary. Also, I just want to point out, the dog unfortunately didn't deter them, but it did sound like maybe a little chihuahua, so maybe they weren't scared. But this went on for 5 minutes before they did run to the backyard. And finally, the girl's dad pulls up, parks in the middle of the street, runs to the back, and he's screaming for them to get off his property. They leave, and then the cops are called. And I'm just saying this given the footage because I initially wondered why this young woman inside the house didn't call the police to begin with, but we never see officers. However, she was probably scared, hiding somewhere in the house, calling her parents because clearly her dad comes up. But she might have been thinking that this was just a prank until afterward when they actually watched the video and realized this was someone really threatening. I did end up seeing a press conference. They are apparently looking for these people, and they do consider this way more than a joke. I don't think it's funny. I would have called the cops right away. And apparently, like I said, she called her father. But now you know why I mentioned that first story by the original poster when she called her fiance before calling the police, because she wasn't sure if it was an actual emergency. This is very similar. Young woman, probably never had to call the police before. And this happened in Virginia. And I have to say, it's appropriate in this story to say it's creepy if it wasn't on Halloween, because it's on Halloween, it's near Halloween, we're thinking these things are going to happen. But if it wasn't on Halloween, this would have been crazy, weird, and very terrifying. But I think at first you might just think, okay, I'm going to let these guys have it. Maybe they're coming around and doing Halloween carols instead of Christmas carols. Maybe this is the new thing. And I'm sure you'll have comments and thoughts on both of these stories. But the next one includes possible real ghosts. So let's explore. It's from the paranormal subreddit from Trashly95 entitled "Saw a Light, an Orb or Flash visible to our own eyes. Can anyone explain?" It goes like this. "I hope I'm doing this right. Forever lurker on Reddit, but never posted that I can remember. Anyways, I've always been into spooky stuff, mostly Halloween in particular. I'm pretty gullible in general, and I'm a people pleaser. But still, I'm a skeptic and not super convinced that the way TV shows and how some people portray ghosts is real. That being said, still open to the idea of energy? I don't know what I'm saying, LOL. I'm not educated on any of this either, just wanted to leave this disclaimer before sharing. It was literally Halloween, almost a month since my grandma had died, and it was 3 a.m. Now, this story already sounds not real, but I wasn't the only one to experience this. My boyfriend / partner / child's father was there, so whatever it was very real to us and just not explainable. We both saw it. My partner and I got back from trick-or-treating with our 1-year-old at 9 p.m., put her to bed in between us, and stayed up pretty late. I'm cutting in to say, why does it always seem like creepy stories do happen at 3 a.m.? I don't know. But back to the original poster. She said, "We live in a garage apartment and stairs lead up to our level, if that makes sense. The backside of our house was ground level, but the front has a flight of stairs. At night, we shut all of the blinds and doors in the rooms besides ours. Our blinds were closed though, so the bedroom my daughter didn't sleep in across the hall was shut. The bathroom door in the middle of the hall was closed. We had our TV on. It was a super small flat screen. Sometime around 3 a.m., we see what looks like a bright LED light manifest in the hallway. But before we could investigate what it was, it shot into our bedroom and lit up the entire room for maybe 20 to 30 seconds. It didn't light up the hall like this, just looked like a small ball of light in the hall. In our room, however, it looked as if someone had flipped the light switch on. It was so bright. It was whitish blue, but brighter than the TV. It happened so fast, we couldn't really process what it was. As soon as we saw it, it was gone. Once again, the room was dark, and all that we saw was this little brightness and color from the small TV. We came to the conclusion that it couldn't be a car. The front of our house, where we may see headlights, is far from the road and not level to the ground for such a bright light to come into our home. Our blinds were closed, and our backyard is gated. It could have been a kid messing around in the backyard with a flashlight, but the blinds were closed, and it was bright inside of the house. Plus, we can hear everything in our backyard. My partner walked around all outside after because he thought it may be an intruder or a kid. We just couldn't explain it, but it scared us so badly we couldn't sleep until we dozed off sometime early that morning. I was afraid to sleep every night for as long as I could physically stay up for about a month. I was just terrified to sleep. I tried to wake up around that same time, 3 a.m. again, because I was afraid to sleep and it happened. Not sure why or what I would do. LOL. Well, OP, since you are laughing or at least saying LOL, I'd say maybe you were also trying to see it again. Just maybe, especially because of what she says next. She wrote, I tried to Google this for a while, but couldn't find much info at the time. I also don't necessarily know how to word it to find experiences like mine. It happened in 2015. My grandma died October 9th of 2015. This was October 31st, or really November 1st, since it was 3 a.m. I'll probably try to Google it again, as a few years have passed. Maybe there's info or stories like this. My boyfriend always tries to explain it as a kid with a flashlight outside, or jokes that it's aliens, which creeps me out, LOL. He admits he's actually still scared of it and likes to joke about it or not talk about it at all. Okay, so all laughing aside, both of them are scared of it, but now she talks about her grandma saying, I always have a feeling if energy after death exists, maybe it was my grandma. She lived in the garage apartment for years before she died. My dad moved her in there to better take care of her and my grandpa, since it was his garage apartment next to his house. Maybe I just wanted to be my grandma because I was grieving and still am, but I just can't explain what this light was. It didn't come from the overhead fan or 2 lamps beside our beds. Everything was off. Even after it happened, the room went back dark. Has anyone experienced this? I feel like if a name exists for it or someone else has seen this, I can stop wondering. Could it have been electrical? My boyfriend is ironically an electrician now, still has no answers. I like to be able to explain things. Okay, OP, I know that was a little long, and we do get the picture here, a bright light that comes into the room from the hall, and it was a ball in the hall, but then it's lighting up the entire room. And she did edit to add this, though. We have 3 family deaths in October, all on my grandma's side that died in October. Her mother died on the same day, 7 years before her, October 9th, 2010. And my great aunt died by self-harm. She was my grandma's sister, October 11th, 2005. Not sure if relevant, but I always thought it was interesting and comforting. First of all, I'm glad that it comforts her that it could be her loved one. I wish I could say that as well, but I feel like even if it was a ghost of my loved one, I would be freaked out. I am sorry for your losses. It is sad losing so many people in such a pretty much not a short amount of time, but one after the other, and they're all in October. So that month must be really hard for this family. It's also interesting that her grandma passed away, but used to live in this same apartment. In the last episodes, we talked about energy transferring, or that it transforms into something else. So could this be the light energy from her grandmother? I think she wants it to be that, because you do want to explain in a way. But I do want to point out, this was originally posted in the ghost subreddit, and one of the moderators actually removed it. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't believe this was a true ghost story, and then it belonged more in paranormal. So that's where it is. But sadly, this post only got 1 comment. And I really think it does deserve more, especially because she was looking for an explanation. But the real McDuck said, my first thought was a sighting of ball lightning, but I don't know if that ever appears as a red color. Interesting. Now, I think the original poster said it was glowing blue, if I'm not mistaken, but since we're all here to discuss, what do you think it could have been? I've heard of orbs. I've seen them in photos, but they aren't bright like this that could light up a whole room. But as a native Floridian, I haven't lived there for 10 years now, well, over 10 years. My first thought was lightning. And oh, how I miss thunderstorms. I know the lightning 100% can light up an entire room very quickly like that and then just go away as fast as it came. But what do you think? Either way, the original poster and her partner were very terrified by this experience for years, and they still want to try to figure out what it is with no answers. And I'm sure that's very frustrating. Well, the next poster seemed to know exactly what they were experiencing on Halloween night. It was also posted in the paranormal subreddit. Their username is a little hard to decipher, so I'm just going to leave it up on the screen. And spoiler alert, it's titled, "My Great-Grandmother Visited on Halloween." They wrote, "I've never posted the story here, and I just suddenly thought of it because I was playing Sims, and my recently deceased grandmother's ghost came to visit in The Sims, and it reminded me of this story, so I figured I should post it." OP, wait a minute. What? Wait, so your grandmother came into the game? Because I'm a big fan of The Sims, especially the vampire expansion pack, but Granny's in the game? Because now I'm interested in video game hauntings. Is that a thing? I imagine the controller kind of being taken over, but let's just continue the story. That's now really interesting to me. But they wrote, "I'm a practicing pagan. I have been for a couple years. And one of the things we do celebrate is Samhain, which is All Hallows Eve or Halloween. We invite the spirits of our ancestors into our home to celebrate with us." Why am I getting Haunted Mansion vibes right now? Well, they said when the story happened, 2 or 3 years ago, I was still living with my parents. So I made a little makeshift altar in their dining room with various little trinkets to appease various ancestors. And I did a little prayer to invite them to celebrate the spooky season with us. Then went off to do other Halloween stuff that was going on. I had a zany costume, took my little sister's trick-or-treating, invited some friends over for a bonfire, then went upstairs to watch scary movies. We went on watching scary movies pretty late into the night. One by one, my friends started leaving, and then finally, the last friend left around 1 a.m. I was tired, so I just fell asleep on the couch upstairs. I woke up around 4 a.m. to someone saying my name and was surprised to see my recently deceased great-grandmother sitting in the chair across from me, but she looked young. There's a painting of her in my house that was made in the 80s when she was already around 50 years old, and she looked younger than that. Better yet, she was doing better too. Towards the end of her life, she had been suffering from severe dementia to the point where at one point she thought I was her deceased husband. But when she visited, she was entirely lucid, remembered my name, and everything. She said that she'd been visiting us all day and watching us and was so proud of how big my little sisters were getting. I started going by my middle name when I was 10, and as her dementia got worse in life, she remembered my name change less and less, but she remembered to call me by my middle name that night and was very proud about it. She said she was very happy to see us all and to see the house because she had wanted to move in with us before, but her health had slipped too quickly to make that move after she suffered a fall. She told me that she loved us and that she was praying for us and told my family hi. I also remember she said, "It's so beautiful here." And I was never sure whether she meant here as in the house or whatever afterlife she's in now. Anyway, we sat and talked for a while, just catching up. We played a memory game, the kind where you have to match the tiles, which were always her favorite, on the floor, which she was able to sit on. She never would have been able to sit like that at her old age, and she kicked my butt. Eventually, she just said that she had to go, and she loved us and was praying for us and just kind of faded, I guess, just disappeared. I woke up a little later on the couch upstairs again, but the memory game was out on the floor, and I must have just fallen back to sleep at some point. This was about 3 years ago. I told my siblings about it, but I never told my mom. She was really close to my grandmommy, and I didn't want to upset her or have her think I was lying, I guess. What would have been grandmommy's 100th birthday is coming up, and I'm tempted to tell my mom about it then, but I'm still not sure how she'll respond. Also, when I told my sister, she told me that she had seen her around the house before, and that she's pretty sure she haunts the house now living with us, like she's always wanted to. Wow. I couldn't even interrupt because, well, like Class 6 at 154 said, wholesome. It does sound very wholesome. It doesn't sound freaky or scary. I almost wanted to tear up a little bit because I miss my grandma a lot, like they said as well. Like reading their comment word for word because it's exactly how I feel. I lost my grandma's and I lost one of mine about 2 years ago. I would love her to come back. I would love them to play my favorite childhood games with me and laugh with me. I also love the thought of her grandmother being healthy, not in the state she was in when she passed away. There were no other comments except that one that said wholesome, which leads me to believe that people don't think this story is true. I almost thought the original poster could have been dreaming because it was so detailed. And most of the time when I read about people seeing ghosts, it's really quick. It doesn't quite make sense to them. It's not really, I was playing a game, I was doing this. That sounds like a dream. But remember the game. You know, they were sleeping on the couch, so could have been a dream, but the game was still out. So I was thinking it had to be sleepwalking if they actually took that game and started playing it while they were asleep. But it is wholesome, as the one commenter said. But speaking of summoning spirits on purpose, last time we talked about Ouija boards. Well, this time I have a story entitled Why I Won't Mess with Ouija Boards. It was posted in the Ghost Stories subreddit, and the original poster has since deleted their account, unfortunately. But it goes like this. It seems like a lot of people have scary experiences with Ouija boards. Here is mine. Back on Halloween night in 2019, I was at a party with my friend Alex and a couple of his friends. We were all having a good time jamming out to spooky Halloween music. We had all been partying pretty good, and some of us were getting tired, but we wanted to play a board game or card game or something to end the night with. One of Alex's friends, who will have her name changed to Lexi for privacy, suggested we do a Ouija board, like in the movies, she said. Now, I grew up in a pretty standard Christian home and was always warned around Halloween time every year, stay away from Ouija boards, blah, blah, blah. They're evil, blah, 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 but didn't really buy into it very much. Well, none of us actually had a Ouija board or knew where to find one. So Lexi suggested we just make our own. So of course, being dumb teenagers, we just looked up the design, took a Sharpie and drew one up using an old guitar pick as a pointer. And we sat down and started asking it questions. At first, the questions were stupid, like, which one of us is the dumbest? Which one of us will make the most money after high school? Just dumb questions that we would just get a bunch of no's, like the board was annoyed or something. Well, after a while of asking dumb questions, Lexi thought it would be a good idea to kick it up a notch. Lexi asked the board if there was anyone who would like to talk to us. Then the whole mood in the room changed. It felt colder, and everyone, for some reason, felt uneasy. The pointer slowly moved over to yes. Almost everyone felt super uncomfortable, but one of our friends, who I'll call Mike, wasn't convinced. He was convinced that somebody was moving the pointer to scare everyone. So Mike decided to conduct a little test and asked the board to name a dead relative that no one in the room knew about. And right then and there, the board spelled out Eleanor. Everyone started freaking out because we all knew Mike's grandmother and her name was Irene. Apparently, Eleanor was his great-great aunt who had passed on before his mom had died. So at this point, we were all scared shitless and asked what the board wanted. And then the board started spelling out extremely vulgar obscenities and weird words that no one knew. We quickly said goodbye and ended the session. We turned on the lights and everyone was so freaked out. We threw out the board and none of us have touched a board since then. So I'm going to say, I don't normally say this unless it's true, but as a child of the 80s, playing around in the 90s, I actually had a similar experience with a Ouija board. Yes, I did. And that's why I think commenter Let Us Awake is right when they commented, this is why people who are like, Ouija boards are just cardboard. They're sold at a toy company and everything. They're harmless. They miss the point. Anything can be a spirit board. It's not the board that's dangerous. So OP responded to that by saying, what baffles me is why it was spelling out obscenities and backwards words. Was that a sign that whatever was communicating wasn't a very friendly entity? Another commenter said, pretty sure it was communicating in some other language. That's what I was thinking. Now, my experience wasn't on Halloween and it's short. I had a Ouija board and we also decided to have a little fun one night. It was completely dark. We were in my living room. We started asking the board questions. We were just having fun. It was a group of kids. We were about 12 years old. And I think I did buy my Ouija board at like Spencer's, and I'm calling it Ouija instead of Ouija. But I asked it out loud if it were real. And if it were a ghost, to show us a sign. And at that very moment, one of the hands on the grandfather clock inside the living room, right next to us, clicked. Just 1 second over. But here's the thing. That clock didn't have batteries. It wasn't powered by anything for years. And the hands were always just perfectly still. I even made my grandmother check, and we confirmed nothing. But a spirit, I guess. The spirit could have moved it. It was so creepy. And I know most people are going to be like, that's not true. I promise you 100% it happened. I don't know how it happened. But last week, a few of you said you liked the shorter stories, especially the last one. That was your favorite, and it was short. So I figured I would throw in just a few short stories. And then, as I promised for 3 weeks in a row, I'm going to tell you my haunted hotel story. So first, Nightmare Gill posted this in the Halloween subreddit about the spookiest thing they experienced on Halloween. And that's where I'm getting the next few stories. They wrote, when I was a kid, we opened the front door in between groups of trick-or-treaters and a huge, solid black cat ran in. It was terrified and cowered under the kitchen table. We made it a comfortable spot in the back bedroom so it could hide out the rest of the night. The next day, we put up flyers, we talked to neighbors, but no one recognized him. We named him Satan, and he lived the rest of his life with us. Every Halloween, we made sure he was in a safe spot in the back bedroom so he wouldn't panic and run off again. Satan was a very good boy. Well, OP, I like black cats. I don't know if I like the name you chose for this one, but I will say I like black cats because of the stigma they have. I feel bad for them. A lot of people don't like them just because they're associated with evil. I actually named mine Rorschach, like the ink blot. We called him Rory. Karma Kitten, fitting name, 17 commented, free black cat. That's the best Halloween gift ever. And it's true. That is really great. It's really great. They did take in a stray cat. And, so it wouldn't run away, get lost. And every Halloween, they made sure he didn't panic. And I think that's adorable. I think it's sad because animals do panic during things like 4th of July, even Halloween, hearing the doorbell ring. Another poster said, I'm probably going to pronounce their name wrong, so I'm just going to, again, put it up on the screen. But they wrote, about 15 years ago, I was basically my parents' live-in nurse. One night, a couple days before Halloween, I'm in my bedroom and I hear my dad's pained wail, scream, because he had phantom pains from losing his leg. And they could get pretty intense at times. I heard it as clear as day. It was louder than usual, but it was definitely the 10 out of 10 super bad phantom pain scream. I bolt up, I run down the hall to my parents' bedroom. Empty. I look through the house and find them both watching TV in the living room. My dad looks perfectly fine. I asked him if he screamed. He said he didn't, and neither of them heard anything. The TV wasn't loud enough to hear from across the house, plus they weren't watching anything that would have a scream like that. I think they were watching White Christmas, and the scream sounded almost like it was right next to me at the time. They swore up and down they didn't hear anything. That's probably the creepiest experience I've had around Halloween. First of all, I wanted to say I'm sorry that your dad went through that. It's awesome that you were so amazing. You were there for your family, but it isn't amazing and not awesome at all when you're hearing a scream like that wasn't even from your father near Halloween. That's terrifying. And one comment said, That sounds horrible. I want to say anytime that I hear something or I see something and then it's not really there freaks me out personally because I'm like, is my mind going? My reasonable explanation would kind of be this though. You know how we get mom brain? You can hear a baby, even, if it's really far away, you'll be like, wait, is my baby crying? And you'll get up and then your baby's not crying. So maybe it's your instinct because she had taken care of her dad for so long that maybe that instinct kicked in and they were hearing that so many times that they heard it just by instinct. Could be, or it could be something creepy. Now, one last one until the story I promised you. This is from Vanished Rabbit. They wrote, we once were dressed up and passed by a cemetery. A few meters further, I decided to take some pictures of my friend in her mask with my Sony CyberShot phone or something. That was like 2008. I didn't check the pictures until later. When I did, I saw a huge, foggy, smoky shape next to her that looked really close to a human figure, or the ghost of one. LOL. Technically, I still have the phone, but it broke back then. I can't turn it on, and I haven't bothered restoring any data. So I wanted to say, I've said this before, cemeteries do scare me. I know that they're beautiful in some ways. It's where we remember the dead, but Poltergeist ruined it for me. And also, we talked about pictures in one of our last episodes where, the picture was weird in a haunted place or a supposed haunted place. Can you explain it? Was it something ghostly in that picture in the middle of the cemetery? Or was it just, I don't know, like light leaking in? I can't be sure, right? I wish we could see the picture and know and judge it for ourselves. But I think that's the perfect lead-in to my story. I promise you I'd tell you about my haunted hotel story when I was 15 years old. So that is the perspective you're hearing the story from, the mind of a 15-year-old. I was on a field trip and we stopped. We were going to the Bahamas, but we stopped to do one night at the Chica Lodge. Now, this is near Key West, Florida, the same place where Robert the Doll lives. And it was my first time staying in a hotel room all by myself. The resort was gorgeous, lush gardens, a golf course, swaying palm trees by the ocean. I had no idea at the time that this beautiful hotel had a spooky side. In fact, part of the resort's grounds included a real graveyard. Yes, built on a damn cemetery, a tiny pioneer graveyard dating back to the 1800s. Now, I didn't learn about that or its ghostly legends until later. But that night, I was about to experience a haunting firsthand, believe it or not, because we will scrutinize this just like we do with every other story. My room was on the top floor, overlooking the back gardens and the golf course. And as it got dark, a rainstorm was rolling in. The rain was pounding on the windows and it was turning the sky a purple gray. I remember feeling a little lonely and on edge, maybe because, traveling by myself, not being there with my family, but the eerie effect of the rain, an unfamiliar room, I just decided to go take a hot shower to relax. And by the way, I was there with a group and there were other girls staying there, but we were all in our own rooms and we did have chaperones, mostly like moms and other people from the school, which were pretty much on the same floor and close by in case we needed anything. But I wasn't scared yet. That comes in just a moment. So inside the bathroom, I saw fresh towels had been stacked by housekeeping, as you would expect, and I hung one of them on a hook and took a long hot shower. And you know the kind, it's where you're not even needing to get clean, you're just enjoying the hot water and the steam. But then I tried to grab my towel. I turn off the shower, I'm dripping wet, and I immediately noticed that something was off. All the towels were gone. The towel rack was empty. I'm looking around, there's no folded towels. I'm confused. I stick my head out. I look into the steamy mirror. I'm trying to see if maybe I'd forgotten where I left them. And then I'm starting to question myself. But I knew there had been towels there a few minutes ago. It's my first night staying in the room. I didn't use any. And now there was nothing. Not a single towel to grab. And that's in and of itself haunting, right? Hate getting out of the shower with no towel, but I digress. My heart started to pound at this point. I'm standing in the shower, feeling this fear run through me because I feel trapped now. Because I'm thinking, could there be somebody in my room? Someone trying to prank me, one of the other girls. But I slip out, I run to the bed, I grab the actual covers that are on my bed, the bed sheet, and I wrap them around me. and I call the front desk. I'm trying to sound calm and not like I'm freaking out like a little teenager. And I asked housekeeping if they could bring more towels. I did tell them I didn't find any and they apologized. And a few minutes later, got the knock on my door, fresh towels. But I couldn't shake the weird feeling that something or someone had been in my room while I was in the shower. It seemed impossible because I locked the doors. So of course I'm brushing it off like it's some kind of fluke or just an oversight by me. So I dried off, got into my comfy clothes. Now it was around 8 or 9 p.m. The rain was heavier. The thunder was rumbling in the distance, and it's Florida. I mean, it's a Florida thing, but it's very comforting to me until the storm gets too close. So I get in bed with a book, hoping to distract myself before I fall asleep, and the room is quiet aside from the rain. I start to relax, convincing myself that the towel thing was nothing. And just as I started to fall asleep, I heard a banging noise that made me jump out of my bed. It sounded like a clank or a thud, and it wasn't from the hallway, but somewhere inside of my room. I was holding my breath so I could listen. Bang, clang. It was like a rhythm, and it was like a metallic sound. And at first I thought it could be a guest in the next room just slamming something around, but then it seemed like it was coming from the air vent above. The vent started to rattle, and then the mysterious banging was echoing through it. But I was on the top floor, so no one was above me. Weird. And that's what I whispered to myself. I'm like, that's weird. I'm trying to rationalize. It's an old building. Maybe it has noisy pipes. Maybe it's the AC duct. I don't know, especially in a storm. But the noise continued. And it was really unsettling because it was almost deliberate at this point. It was like banging around, and I thought that somebody knew I was awake and bothered. But then I got goosebumps. I finally reached for the phone. I called the front desk again. Now I'm embarrassed. And the moment that the concierge answered the phone, the banging just stopped. It just went silent. I didn't even know what to say. So I just mentioned that I'd heard some noises through the vents, and I was a little concerned, and they said they could send some maintenance person out, but I said, no thanks. And I just hung up. And then I just sat there in silence. Nothing but rain. Did it stop because it wasn't there? Did it stop because it was just a weird sound? Or did it stop because it knew I was calling for help, so to speak? And maybe it wanted me all alone. I don't know. But a few minutes later, I was starting to settle down again, and the banging started again, and it was louder. And now it seemed to move into the walls. Heavy thumping, knocking inside the wall near my head. And it made me jump again. And I was like, that's it. I'm officially freaked out. I grabbed the phone. I dialed the other room, which was my friend Jenna. She was my exact same age. And I said, Jenna, please, can you come over here? Something weird is going on in my room. Now I'm whispering. I'm thinking that something could hear me. And now she's getting scared. She doesn't want to be alone just because of my story. So she comes to my room. We double check that the deadbolt is on the door. We peek everywhere around the room. There's nothing there. And then we get into bed. But I didn't know at the time that the hotel was originally built decades ago. The main lodge dated back to the 1940s, and part of the property even earlier than that. Now, given Isla Morada's history, the devastating Labor Day hurricane of 1935, well, that wiped out the original buildings and killed hundreds of people. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of these structures, creaked and groaned and it wasn't actually haunted, but we were still on edge and we didn't even know any of that. But then the thunderstorms started. And it was just rain before, but now it was a full-on thunderclaps, lightning, everything. The wind was blowing, the palm trees were going in different directions outside, and I could not stop looking through our window because I love thunderstorms. But when you're already scared, it's much creepier. It can make everything seem much more haunted. The lightning was so bright, it was lighting up the entire room for a second, and then it would go black again, which is why I said I could relate to that one story about the ball of light. But then came the moment I will never forget. It started with a noise. Now, it wasn't a bang this time, it was something else. And through the storm, I was trying to listen, and it sounded like a faint whisper or some kind of cry. I wasn't sure, but I went to the window. I'm looking out to the dark gardens, and I feel compelled to I'm pressing my face like right up against the glass, trying to get the best view. I was trying to rationalize. Maybe there's a guest down there, maybe it's an animal, because that would calm me down, but it was just dark. And then there was a flash of lightning, and just for a split second, the gardens lit up. It would illuminate like daylight with one of those flashes. And something brought my eye down to the lawn. There was a woman in a white dress. She was far enough away that I couldn't make out the details of her face, but the figure was wearing an old-fashioned flowing white gown that was not drenched by the rain. So that stood out to me. And I know it was far, so you're probably wondering, what do you mean? Well, it was flowing like a dress would when you're walking down a staircase or something like that, like elegantly. If you were drenched, it would be clinging to your body. It wasn't like that. And then it went dark. And I was so freaked out, but I was still frozen. And then boom, another thunderclap. I almost peed myself. But before I could even pull myself away from that window and jump back in bed, the lightning struck again. And I looked back out there, and you can probably guess, the woman was closer. Now I could see in one gloved hand, she was holding this delicate cloth umbrella, not the ones you use to prevent the rain or from getting wet, but the ones you would wear for style. And the rain was going right through it. This was a ghost because she wasn't walking on the ground. I didn't see her feet. They just were not there. She was floating. And you know when they say your life flashes before your eyes? Well, that didn't happen to me, but instead, thoughts were flashing. I remember I was having a bunch of them at once. Like, is this really there? Is it a woman staying at the hotel? I don't know. Maybe it's somebody in a character costume outfit. This wasn't near Halloween. Maybe there's some kind of weird, I don't know, recreation from those days happening. You know, those wartime recreations? Everything was going on in my mind. I'm only 15. Probably not thinking about wartime creations, but just a character of some kind. Either I was saying something weird out loud or looking weird because I was staying there too long, but Jenna was like, "What's wrong?" She was still in bed. I looked back at the window after looking at her, and there's nothing there. So I'm going to look like a weirdo. She's not going to believe me. I don't want to scare her. I don't know how I managed to actually fall asleep that night because I remember shaking in bed, pulling the covers all the way over my head, and I did not look back out there. It wasn't until later when I'm traveling to the Bahamas and I mentioned it to the chaperones, the older women in our group, the mothers and the teachers, that they tell me about the hotel being built on a graveyard. It was the resting place of over 50 early settlers and family members from the 19th century. They had built a small church and a schoolhouse right next to where the cemetery still is, and tragically, the Great Hurricane of 1935 just tore all of those buildings and killed so many people in that community. Visitors have even reported seeing a young female ghost near the graves or feeling an unseen child's hand slip into their palm at night. And learning about that sent chills up my spine because I realized the lady in white that I saw could have been one of those long departed locals that were still wandering, going to her old home, feeling comforted by it. And perhaps she was pioneer's wife or a daughter, but she was just forever in that Victorian gown. Maybe she watched over the grounds. I don't know. And maybe a mischievous child ghost that they talk about was responsible for my vanishing towels. And maybe those were just playful banging sounds. I'll never know for sure. But it's a theory that makes sense to me now that I know everything. Even Chica Lodge's staff and guests have whispered about very odd things happening around this hotel. Lights flickering, the feeling of a presence in an empty room. I didn't hear these stories, like I said, until after my encounter. But it did help me validate that maybe something paranormal or supernatural might have been going on here. But I didn't want to feel alone in this experience because I became fascinated and a little bit terrified that it could have really been a haunted hotel. Now, one just lighthearted thing I wanted to end with is that there's literally a drink that you can order, and I wish I could because this sounds fabulous. You can order it at the bar at the Chica Lodge. It's called the Phantom Punch. I told John he has to try to make this for me. You can get their recipe online. On Instagram, there is a picture they posted 6 weeks ago. It says that the Chica Lodge and Spa whispers of the past drift through swaying palms and turquoise tides. Just steps away from the ocean lies the Pioneer Cemetery. Early settlers of Islamorada rest between the Keys' tropical skies. Legend has it, on Halloween night, their spirits rise, not to haunt, but to celebrate in their honor. Our bartenders craft a drink that shimmers with mystery and history. Pioneer's Phantom Punch, with rich Florida Keys rum, crimson blood orange, smoky bitters, and even 24 karat gold leaf. Its haunted sip is equal parts eerie. One taste and you might feel history stirring in the shadows. And whoever wrote that, you are really a poet. That was beautiful. But now I just want to say cheers and rest in peace to the people who have lost their life there. And if you are haunting the Chica Lodge and you are celebrating on Halloween, I hope that it is a positive experience. But what's the explanation? Is just the light I saw, maybe the light of the lightning, maybe it bounced off of something, or was it a person down there trying to scare people? Or was it a dream? I don't know. I was very much awake, so I tend to think it is a haunting. But I do want to thank you for being here for one of my stories. Remember, there's a link in my description box if you want to share one of your stories. I do have a subreddit called Candidly Kimbyr as well, but most people like to share them anonymously, and I totally understand, and some of you don't have Reddit, so I've made that link for you, and I hope to hear and tell one of your stories soon. Happy Halloween. I will see you in my very next video. Bye.